Perhaps, gentlemen, let's now discuss solutions. What are the possible scenarios for the nation as it stands today, Harvey?
Now, Michelle, you're asking my friend here very difficult questions. You know, when you're studying mathematics, we have Malkiat Singh on simple mathematics, and we have advanced mathematics by Professor Nelcon. Now, you see, let me do what Orengo did to Pierre Lumumba and take my good friend here to school. The solution here is simple. We need to follow the law.
Yes.
The Supreme Court has made a decision that has not been set aside. The High Court, however much it disagrees with the decision of the Supreme Court, has no obligation but to comply with that decision. IBC had made its initial decision to include Raila and Uhuru alone in the ballot on the basis of the Supreme Court decision. Now they are faced with an option to comply with the Supreme Court decision or comply with the High Court decision. You don't need to go to school to know that the Supreme Court decision takes precedence over the High Court decision. Way forward, IBC should do the correct thing. Unless, of course, IBC is what we suspect it to have been all along, being an appendage of Jubilee. If it is an appendage of Jubilee, let it continue doing what Jubilee wants and hold a sham election. But if it is an independent constitutional commission, which we taxpayers established, and for which a sum of about 12 billion is about to be spent, then it must down its tools, commence the process in the manner in which the Supreme Court directed, initiate a nomination process, and let's have an election, preferably 120 days from now. Otherwise, we're going to install a dictatorship. And you see, if we have demagogues who support a dictatorship, people with great knowledge or who are supposed to have great knowledge of law support a regime of this kind, then we are destined to a journey that we will not be able to complete.
All right.
We're destined for hell.
Michelle,
yes.
let me agree and disagree with my senior. I agree with Harvey here that going forward, we need to follow the law. Actually, we need to follow the law. But where I disagree with him when he said that decision from the Supreme Court should bind the lower courts, one thing he's not telling you is that that part of the decision they are relying on from the Supreme Court, it is an obiter dictum, so which is not binding to the High Court. And that is what the judge of the High Court, John Mutivo, did. He said that whatever IBC relied on to exclude the likes of Ekuro Court was not something that was binding
upon the High Court. All right. Perhaps, you know, even as this continues, let's take a look at the precedents here being set as the opposition still maintains they will not go to this election. IBC still maintains elections will be held on the 26th. The opposition boycotted the public hearings on the proposed amendments on the election by Jubilee. Jubilee said whether we will come or not, we will go ahead and deliberate on these amendments. They did that. They took that to Parliament without the opposition members of Parliament. Again, they did that and now have passed the laws. If Jubilee, or if NASA rather, or the opposition continues with this stance and they will not participate in this election and the election is indeed held on the 26th of October, again, who is on the losing end and how does this solve solutions for Kenyans? Because will this be deemed a legitimate election if NASA does not go to the polls? Harvey.
Now, let me set out this quite clearly. We are in a presidential system where Parliament is prorogued by the president elected together with that Parliament. Essentially, the first sitting of Parliament is supposed to be directed by the president-elect. Now, in a situation of this kind, by the time President Uhuru Kenyatta purported to call the first sitting of Parliament, his election was challenged in the Supreme Court. So he had no mandate in law to prorogue Parliament. Now, the Parliament that sat pursuant to the calling by President Uhuru Kenyatta was an illegal Parliament. And anything that has been done by this Parliament is a nullity from the beginning. Let me give you an example. Assuming after the election of President Uhuru Kenyatta in 2013, when President Kibaki was still in office, Could President Kibaki go to Parliament and address Parliament? No, he couldn't. Could President Kibaki assent to a bill passed by a Parliament elected together with the election of President Uhuru Kenyatta? It didn't. And now these people tend to exploit certain lacunas in the Constitution to achieve an otherwise ill motive. It is as clear as daylight that President Uhuru Kenyatta does not have any authority in law to assent to a bill when his election has been invalidated and when we are going for a next election. Now, if you look at the manner in which these electoral laws were being pursued, it's quite evident that they were being pushed down the throat of Kenyans, whether they wanted it or they didn't want it. And it's a clear indicator that we have reached a situation in time where we've gone back to the 80s and the 70s, where the regime in power, so to speak, wants to obliterate opposition completely. And whatever they do, in my humble opinion, based upon what I've just indicated before, is not in conformity with the Constitution. And as day succeeds night, as soon as President Uhuru Kenyatta pens his signature on those bills, we'll be in court the following hour. We'll not even wait for a second, and they will be quashed by the court. That one, again, my friend, you can take to the bank. And unless and until this regime complies with the law, we'll continuously put them on check until such a time as they exit or they comply with the law. It's as simple as that.
All right, Joseph.
Michelle, you know, Nelson Harvey is one of those people that I really admire in this legal field. And it's quite unfortunate that he's misleading us here. One thing that the Constitution says is this, that President shall address the Parliament. It does not say President-elect. So the President, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, was within the law to address the Constitution. Then the second thing is when he talks about that the President has no powers to append his signature to those bills. You can see it clearly in the Constitution, when the Constitution talks about the temporary incumbency powers that the President has, and the President doesn't have. Is it among those things? No. So the President is within the law. Me, I don't understand these confusions that we are running up and down about them. The President will sign nothing. It will be, I think my good friends will be in court, and I think the court will set the record straight.